There are a few things I want to talk about near the beginning of the path you're about to take. I want to talk about habits. I want to talk about intentions, and I want to talk about some tools to help you get started and be able to leverage right away. So the first thing I want to talk about is habits. I mentioned this idea of like 904 days ago, I started playing the piano. It's been a little longer now because I've waited a few days, and so I'm still going. But the point of it wasn't to brag, although it's hard for my ego to get out of that because I'm really proud. But the point is that I gave myself a habit that was so easy to accomplish, or a goal that was so easy to accomplish, a daily micro habit of playing the piano every day for at least 5 minutes a day. And that's something that is doable. It's something I can accomplish. And that's something I can feel good about over time, and I can grow from. That doesn't mean I'm only doing 5 minutes a day, but it's the minimum. And as long as I do that, I maintain that momentum and I maintain that consistency. And then other days I'll grow that 5 minutes into larger time periods. And I've probably logged in almost 1,000 hours now since I started. So I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't started with that 5-minute habit, and I probably would have just given up more easily if I hadn't begun that habit. I want to talk a little bit more about habits because we all have them. In fact, there was a study by Duke, I believe in 2006, that said basically, people 40% of the time, their decisions that they're making are basically based on habits. They're habitual thinking, and they're not really rational decision making where you're weighing the pros and cons or you're even aware of what you're doing. And part of that's because our brains are designed to do that. They're designed to take on routines, especially things that we do on a regular basis. So that we learn these patterns, we don't have to think about them anymore going forward. I mean, if we did, we'd be real trouble trying to drive a car because we'd be overwhelmed by all the different decisions we have to make. I don't know if you can remember when you first learned how to drive a car, but it was especially when there were stick shifts, how do you get things to all work cohesively? And I got to pay attention to this, I got to pay attention to this. And nowadays, no problem at all. You barely even think about driving. Sometimes you don't even realize you've driven because you just arrive at your destination. So habits are completely natural. A complete process of our brain in order to be able to help us out. However, sometimes we can develop good habits and we can develop bad habits. Probably all of us have a little bit of a vice somewhere. We either drink too much or we smoke too much or we eat too much, guilty with the sugar, because it's a pattern. It's something that we don't even think about. So it can be hard to break those habits. And the real trick is actually you actually can't break a habit. You actually can't stop doing something. The more you think about trying not to do something, the more you'll think about doing it, and the more energy you'll put towards it. And if I told you to stop thinking about pink elephants, the next thing you know, you're going to have a pink elephant in your head because our brains are just trained to think about things. So the better way to do it is to replace the habit with something that you want to achieve. I'm going pretty fast through these habits because there's books that are great. The Power of Habit is a great one. There's a book called Micro Habits. There's also a book called The Slight Edge, which kind of talks about habits in a slightly different way. I think Napoleon Hill goes all over the place with habits because they're very powerful, and they really do tend to become the blueprints of our lives. Because we stop paying attention to them, they kind of run on autopilot. If we want to set ourselves up with good habits so that when they run on autopilot, they run on autopilot for us as opposed to into a brick wall. So it really is very valuable to learn about habits and recognize I think we get used to the term habit that we don't realize how powerful they are and how much influence they have over the course of our life. But if you do a series of bad habits over the course of your life, you'll go, just slowly but surely down. And if you do great habits, slowly but surely you'll go up. And then that's the slight edge. What's happening with a habit is essentially our brains are firing patterns across. We have neurons that fire with each other, and the more we do something, the more we think about something, the more those same neurons will fire together. They call it, those that fire together wire together, and essentially new connections can be created, and the brain will start to adapt and create more capability for those things that we want to do. It just becomes more capable in terms of capacity for our thinking. And so the more we do something that we want to do, the more our brain will create that capability. And so that can take some time. And so you don't want to think about the thing that you don't want to do because it'll just fire those and it'll just create more connections that way. So you definitely want to just kind of refocus yourself towards what you want to achieve and get your brain to fire in those directions and become more capable that way. How long does it take to change a habit? I've read things that say 21 days, I've read 29 days, I've read 60 something days, I've read 18 months. I think it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. For me, I've been flossing for 1,000 days, and I would have stopped tomorrow if I wasn't tracking it. That's my point. I think it's really, really important to track your habits. I use an app called Way of Life. I don't get paid for this, but I love it. It's really easy for me to be able to keep track of at least 10 different habits I'm trying to accomplish. But I know people that say, oh, I don't need to worry about tracking it. That's all good. But I really think that if you don't track it, you're not aware of when you're going up or when you're like falling off. I've heard people like, I stopped one day and the next, 3 months later, I haven't done it again. So by tracking it, you know exactly when you've fallen off the horse and know when to get back up. And companies do this every day, right? They track their analytics because they need to know whether or not they're succeeding, or if they're not, how to get back on course.